Are you on a journey to create better thumbnails that more people will click on and that will get you noticed on YouTube? My name is Angela and I'm a visually impaired designer. Hey, what's up everyone? In today's video, I'm going to be sharing my top design tips to help you improve your thumbnails for YouTube so that hopefully more people will see your videos and they'll watch them. As someone who's a graphic designer and is also visually impaired, I'm on a mission to help you better understand how you can do aesthetically pleasing thumbnails and can also be accessible to a wider range of people. If that's something that you want to learn how to do or you want to support me in doing that, subscribe to my channel below so that you can see notifications when I post new videos. In my next video on Thursday, I'll be sharing real-life examples of thumbnails that other creators have sent to me to critique. Now let's get to the nitty-gritty. Alright, so we're going to break down a thumbnail into 4 categories. First is brand identity. Second is the photography that goes into a thumbnail. Third is any typography, any text that you decide to put on your thumbnail. And the fourth thing is layout and how the photography and typography interact. All right, so first let's talk about brand identity. The most successful brands out there are instantly recognizable. As a creator, you need to find a way to create a unique brand so that your viewers will instantly know that they are looking at your video and they will know exactly what to expect in your videos. As someone who highly values accessibility, especially for those with visual impairments, that is a huge thing that I take into consideration when designing my thumbnails. So you need to decide for yourself what you want to reflect in your thumbnails and what you want people to know instantly. There's a reason why there's a saying, a picture says 1,000 words. Your thumbnail can say so much to your audience without you having to spell it out explicitly. One of the biggest design principles to keep in mind when it comes to brand identity is unity and variety. Now, it's important to find a way to have things unified so that it's obvious that all of the videos are yours, but also you want to find ways to add variety so that it's fun and engaging and it doesn't all look the same. The purpose of a thumbnail is to draw a viewer into your video and have them watch your video over someone else's video. You want to grab their attention, but you don't need to say everything in your thumbnail. Your title and your description can also help a viewer decide if they want to watch your video, but the first thing that they're going to see is your thumbnail. If your thumbnail is too complicated and has too many things going on, no one's going to be clicking on your thumbnails because they're just not going to understand what's happening, and whether or not it's on purpose, they're just going to glaze over it and go to the next thumbnail that draws their attention. In the case of a thumbnail, less is definitely more. When you're in your editing software, it might be easy to look at it large and think, oh, this will look good, people will be able to read it, no problem. So it's important to make sure that as you're going along, you find ways to either zoom in and or out. You can put it in a mock-up of your YouTube page so that you can see what it looks like. And it's really important to pay attention also to the mobile and desktop, because on the mobile, the thumbnails are even smaller. You want to put it into the context that it's going to be in so that you can see how your viewers will see it. If you can't read it, someone else won't be able to read it, especially because you already know what it says. So something really helpful that I like to do is create my thumbnail and then have someone with fresh eyes look at it and be able to see if they can tell what my thumbnail is about, if they can read it, and if it just makes sense overall. Now let's talk about photography, the images. You can choose to put whatever image you want with it. Make sure that the image is relevant to your video. So if it's a sit-down video like this one, and I'm walking through telling you how to create a thumbnail, I could either put a picture of me working at my computer, I could put a picture of me talking with you with an expression that fits the video. I could show my thumbnails or a thumbnail that I'm working on recently. And that part is really up to you and the aesthetic that you want your videos to have. On top of photography or using an image for your thumbnail, you can also include icons. So if there's something relevant, like this video for me, I might use the YouTube logo. If you're using a certain program or you're promoting a certain product or something like that, it can make sense to put that into your thumbnail as well. I would suggest that you try to limit how many photos you're using in your thumbnail. If you can, limit it to 1 or 2. The more images you have in your thumbnail, it's just going to complicate your thumbnail. And like we discussed earlier, we want to make it as simple as possible. So you want to make sure when you're including a picture, it's best to take a picture specifically for the thumbnail. A lot of people will use a screenshot, but those don't always turn out to be very flattering. They're weird positions, and it's not really planned out. It can be okay to use a screenshot, but my preference is personally just to take the time before or after filming, or even sometimes during a video, to take a picture of me while filming, and then I'll use that for a thumbnail. A big part of choosing your images is making sure that your background isn't distracting or taking away from you in the image or whatever you're trying to feature, and it's not distracting for the typography. For my thumbnails, I choose to get rid of the background and add a pop of color that works well for my brand so that I can focus on me and then the words that I'm trying to present in my thumbnail. It really reduces the amount of noise in my thumbnails. For some niches and brands, it might be good to put the background in. Maybe you're a lifestyle vlogger or you focus on photography or something and you want people to be able to see the background. Make sure that you just really intentionally only put what you want in your image in the image and nothing else. You want to make sure that you pay attention to the cropping of your picture so that you're intentionally thinking about where you're going to place the words, if you're going to have any words or icons or anything else in your thumbnail. Because if you just take it in the middle here and you're planning on putting text, it's going to be a lot harder to add text here and here. Whereas if I purposely place myself here, then I have this space all over here to add words or icons or whatever I want. Common problems that you should pay attention to are if the image is too yellow, so paying attention to the lighting. It's always best to take a picture in natural light. So face a window, you could go outside to take the picture, whatever you need to have more of a natural light so it doesn't come off super yellow. Also make sure your picture isn't too dark. This also has to do with your lighting. And these things can also be manipulated within editing software, but it's always best practice to do your best to make it work without having to edit it. And then your editing is reduced and it just looks more natural and like real life. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is typography. When you're adding text to your thumbnail, there's several things that it's important to pay attention to. I bet you can guess that one of the most important to me is the legibility of text. You need to be able to read it when it's really small. Now, one of the biggest tips I have for you is to really limit how many words you put on your thumbnail. I would say you would never want to put more than 6 words on your thumbnail. Because when you start adding more than 6 words to your thumbnail, it makes it so that your type is too small and it's going to be too hard for anyone to read. In fact, I try to limit my thumbnails to 2 to 4 words. I challenge you to find a way to use the minimal amount of words as possible on your thumbnails. Another tip I have for you is the text in your title and the text on your thumbnail don't have to match exactly. You can make them a little different, and then that way your viewer has a little bit more information and it makes it a little more interesting. Now, I'm not saying it can't be part of your title. It could just be your title simplified in a couple of words. One design principle that can be really helpful for this is keeping in mind that you don't want to show and say the same thing. If you have a picture of an apple, you don't need to write the word apple. It's important to make sure that your thumbnail is cohesive, it works well with your title, it works well with the image and the text, and it's all complementing each other. All right, a couple of other things that are important to me when it comes to the typography on your thumbnail is what font you choose to use. So you want to make sure that you're using a font that's super legible. You don't want to use a script font that's too fancy or a serif font that has a lot of thicks and thins in it. A really good, simple sans serif font will do you really well. You want it to be super simple and just easy for anyone to read. Because let's face it, even people who can see well have a hard time sometimes with seeing thumbnails. So here's 3 examples of fonts that I suggest you use. A sans serif font. Condensed fonts can be good because then you can fit more words in a smaller amount of space. And I would suggest using a regular or bold style of your font. You don't want them to be too thin or too extra bold because then that decreases the legibility. Finding a way to make your typography work, so adding a background or having no background where the text is, adding an outline or a shadow or something to help make your typography really pop off of your thumbnail is going to go a long way. What you don't want to do is be distracting in the way that you make your typography pop off. Now, a couple of things to avoid is doing too thick of a stroke where all you see is the stroke instead of the actual letters. Having a stroke color that is very similar to the color of the text that you're using. You want to have high contrast there. And really paying attention to what you're covering up with your typography. The last thing we need to cover is layout. Now, it's super important to pay attention how everything comes together. The most important design principle when it comes to layout is hierarchy. Hierarchy is deciding what's going to be the most important thing, the second most important thing, and so on that's in your thumbnail. So say you're making a thumbnail and you're going to have a picture, you're going to have icons, you're also going to have text. It's going to be really important to make sure that it's obvious what the hierarchy is, meaning what's the most prominent. So if your focus is the image that you're going to be using, make sure that your image is more prominent than the words. If you want people to really gravitate towards the words that you're putting, you can make the image that you're using smaller. You can kind of blur it. That's a way of making it so it's less noticeable. The placement of all of the different elements is going to be super key. I think it's best to make sure you decide how you want your thumbnail to look before you actually create it. It will help you save time and also help you think through how you want your thumbnail to be. So for me, I like to draw sketches of what I'm thinking or even just think about it in my head. Don't be afraid to create many different ways that your thumbnail can look with the same assets, or even try different assets and see which ones you like the most. An important thing to keep in mind with the layout is color blindness. Now, I've done a whole video on color blindness and how to design for color blindness. I'll make sure to link it for you if you want to see that video. But on a basic level, it's super important to make sure you don't rely on color only to give the message that you're trying to give with your thumbnail. Two colors to really avoid putting together are red and green. Now, something that I like to do to make sure I'm accommodating those with color blindness is make sure that I put my thumbnail in grayscale before I upload it. Because if it works well in grayscale, someone who's colorblind will be able to read it and interact with your thumbnail, regardless of what type of color blindness they have. Now, a super important thing to keep in mind when doing a thumbnail is the timestamp, especially on mobile, is in the bottom right corner of your thumbnail. So if you put words in the bottom right corner, it's not going to be visible to anyone, regardless if they can see it or not. And there's also the little things in the top right corner that can make it so that sometimes you can't see it as well. And so I try to make sure that most of my text, if not all of it, is in the top left corner over here so that it's easily read no matter what platform it's being viewed on. All right, that's all the tips I have for you today. If you have additional questions, make sure to comment them below. In my next video on Thursday, I'll be sharing real-life examples of thumbnails that other creators have sent to me to critique. Now, this is going to be great because I'll be able to share with you real-life examples of how to apply the tips that I share in this video. So make sure that you subscribe to my channel below so that you can receive a notification when that video is uploaded. Well, until then, I hope that you have a fantastic week. Bye!